Alright folks, grab your popcorn because this story is about to get wild. It all starts in a power plant outside of town, where employees are throwing a birthday bash for one of their co-workers. Everyone's having a great time until they spot something strange on the security cameras. There's a shadow moving in the shaft. One brave worker decides to check it out, but surprise, he gets ambushed by a mysterious monster. He tries to make a run for it back to the office, but a whole pack of these beasts is hot on his heels, and before you know it, chaos erupts as they start taking out everyone in the building. As if that wasn't enough, an eclipse rolls in and hides the sun, and suddenly, these creatures start popping up all over the globe, wreaking havoc and taking millions of lives. The news dubs it Judgment Day, and soldiers are sent in to battle these monsters in a war that lasts the entire eclipse. It's a total disaster, millions of lives lost and resources drained, but eventually, humanity manages to exterminate the creatures. Phew. Now, they can start rebuilding and even design protective installations called gates, just in case those nasty monsters decide to come back for a rematch. Fast forward 15 years, and the world has settled back into a routine. Meet Dave, who's now working as a janitor for a company that doesn't pay him nearly enough, especially since he has to go into the shafts to clean up dead animals. Meanwhile, at the local school, Laura is teaching and has become friends with fellow teacher Milton, who just won't stop asking her out on dates. Laura divorced Dave ages ago and is still working through some emotional baggage, but today, she finally decides to accept Milton's invitation. Now, let's check in on their son, Tyler, who's hanging out with his girlfriend, Maddie. Maddie is a bit anxious about the upcoming eclipse, but Tyler reassures her there's nothing to worry about. After all, there have been plenty of eclipses in the last 15 years, and nothing bad has happened. Meanwhile, Officer Garrett gets a call from the personnel at one of the gates, asking him to come over because they've confirmed some major seismic activity. He heads over, feeling like this time it's not just a drill. As he checks the systems, a power box suddenly explodes, knocking out a whole grid. Back in the city, Dave goes to pick up Tyler at Laura's house. While Tyler is busy playing video games, Dave and Laura start arguing. It turns out Laura was pregnant with Tyler during the last disaster, and Dave wasn't there for her. She's still holding on to that grudge. Just as things heat up, Tyler interrupts them, ready to leave with his dad. It's the middle of the night when Dave gets a call from his Uncle Ted, who's convinced the new Judgment Day is happening tomorrow. He invites Dave and the fam to his shelter before the eclipse starts. Meanwhile, Tyler is glued to the news, seeing millions of dead fish washing up on beaches everywhere. Sound familiar? It's one of the signs from 15 years ago. Just then, a monster sneaks up the stairs at the gate, like it's trying to crash the party. At the same time, Laura calls Dave, saying she saw the news and wants Tyler to come home because Milton has a shelter on lock. Dave wants Tyler to stay with him, and they start arguing. Suddenly, Tyler gets a text that makes him sneak out of the house. When Dave goes looking for him, all he finds is a note with Maddie's number. Typical teenager move. Milton is rushing Laura because the shelter is filling up fast. When she tells him Tyler's gone, he uses special software to track the kid's phone and finds him at the skate park. Turns out Tyler is there with Maddie, who's a nervous wreck because her parents ditched her. Tyler promises he'll never leave her hanging like his dad. Just then, a huge flock of birds appears in the sky, another sign of the end times. People freak out and start booking it out of town. Dave gets stuck in traffic but bails on his car to keep searching on foot. At the gate, the workers hear strange sounds and bam! A monster attacks one of the guys. Garrett books it while the soldiers open fire, but their bullets are like mosquito bites to this beast. Finally, Dave finds Tyler and Maddie just as the emergency sirens start blaring. Luckily, Laura and Milton show up and scoop them up in Milton's ride. With an hour to go before the eclipse, the city is total chaos. There's traffic everywhere, and cultists are walking around the cars, scaring drivers with their painted faces and doomsday vibes. Milton finds an opening and floors it, getting the fam to the shelter. But it's a madhouse, with people begging to get in while the military says only women and kids can enter. Dave tells Tyler to go with Laura and Maddie, but once inside, Tyler has second thoughts and runs back to his dad, saying he'd never leave him behind. So, the women follow Dave out, and just then, the scoreboard blares that the shelter is completely full. The group rushes back to the car, brainstorming their next move. Dave wants to head to Uncle Ted's hideout in the desert, while Milton thinks they should hide at the school since it's closer and has a basement. But before they can decide, they get stuck in yet another traffic jam. Just as they're about to lose their minds, an earthquake hits, and the eclipse begins. With the world plunging into darkness, the monsters start crawling out to wreak havoc. They take over the city and start causing chaos, just like they did 15 years ago. Dave insists they need to leave the city, but Milton gets all huffy because it's his car and he thinks he knows how to save everyone. A classic my way or the highway moment swoops in. An argument breaks out, punches are thrown, and just when you think it's about to turn into a full-blown wrestling match, a flying monster swoops down and snatches Milton away. While Laura screams in shock, Dave shoves her into the car and takes the wheel, finally determined to get his family out of the city. As they drive along the canal, they start speculating about the monster's origins. Were they sent by God? Or are they just really angry neighbors? Who knows? Eventually, the car starts sputtering, running low on gas. Dave decides it's time to find a replacement. He parks next to a bunch of abandoned cars and starts checking inside, but dude only finds bodies. But when he finally discovers an empty car, he hops in, only to be yanked down by a hidden driver in the back seat. There's a monster nearby, he whispers urgently, and the monster starts prowling around the vehicles, searching for its next snack. Luckily, it doesn't see them and moves on, but then it finds one of the bodies and starts munching away. So, Dave, ever the resourceful one, quietly starts rolling the car back to Laura and the kids. Now both cars are parked side by side, and Laura and the kids decide to make a stealthy move from one car to the other. They're being super quiet, but wouldn't you know it, the monster notices them and comes charging after them. So, the old man jumps out of the car, armed with a salt shaker, thinking he can stop the beast. But the monster's like, "Nice try, Gramps," and takes a bite out of him. While the monster's distracted, the family makes a break for it, taking an abandoned road in the mountains. But the city's swarming with monsters, and they're all heading towards the family's destination, Uncle Ted's concrete bunker hideout. When they finally reach the bunker, they start yelling and banging on the door, but nobody comes out. Little do they know, Ted's watching them on the security cameras while someone's holding a gun to his head. Just then, a horde of monsters appears in the mountains, charging towards the bunker. Dave grabs a tire iron to protect his loved ones, but suddenly, the door opens and they rush inside. They find Ted, his wife Stella, and even Officer Garrett, who got separated from his unit. Garrett's packing heat, which makes Dave a little nervous. After a quick meal, they can't help but notice the monsters trying to break down the door on the monitors. The radio's useless too, just screaming. Maddie asks how the monsters find them, and Garrett explains they react to light and heat. He also shares a story about how he survived the first Judgment Day by burying himself in salty mud at a refinery. Gross, but clever. While Garrett's distracted, Ted signals Dave to grab a knife and hide it. But little do they know, a centipede-like monster's crawling in through a hole in the mesh covering the window. Garrett announces he's taking the first watch shift, and Ted invites everyone else to play cards instead of sleeping. Dave grabs the knife, but Garrett notices and pulls his gun, forcing Dave to put it down. Turns out, Ted was against letting Garrett stay, but Stella took pity on him. Now Garrett's determined to survive, no matter what. Tyler jumps Garrett, trying to grab the gun, but Garrett just shoves him away. An argument breaks out, but Maddie interrupts, pointing out they can't hear the monsters anymore. Suddenly, a centipede-like monster bursts out of the wall and takes a bite out of Stella. Ted rips the creature off his wife's neck and pours salt on it, while Dave punches Garrett to take his gun and tries to shoot the monster. The little bugger dodges all the bullets, but Maddie saves the day with a well-aimed knife throw. They tie up Garrett and try to stop Stella's bleeding, but she needs serious medical attention. Just then, they spot a huge beast repeatedly slamming the front door, trying to break in. Dave says they should scram, but Ted doesn't want to risk moving Stella. Stella reminds him about the underground tunnel that leads to the mountains. Garrett reveals he has a car with a full tank and offers to drive them to the gate. Seems like a trap, but Garrett points out it's in his best interest to help them. Before leaving, Ted shows off his impressive weapon stash, and everyone arms themselves. Dave opens the door and blows up the first monster that comes through, then joins the others in the tunnel. Once it's sealed, they head outside and realize Stella's transforming into a monster. As they walk down the road, Tyler spots a dead monster. Maddie goes to touch it, but Tyler stops her just in time. And suddenly, a tentacle bursts out of the ground, grabs Maddie's legs, and tries to drag her away. Tyler and Dave hold her back while Laura shoots at the tentacle until Maddie's free. They run off, and Garrett convinces Dave to untie him in case they need backup. But little does everyone know, Dave's hiding an injury. They reach the top of the mountain and see the city burning. Garrett's car won't start, and monsters appear, charging at them. Stella takes Ted's gun, planning to end it before she fully transforms. Ted fights her until he gets the gun back and begs her to get in the car. Dave knows it's hopeless and drags Ted away. Stella waits for the monsters, who quickly gobble her up. Garrett finally gets the car started, and they escape, leaving the monsters behind. They pick up a radio signal saying most shelters were destroyed. When they arrive at the gate, no one answers the radio, and the door's wide open. Alright everyone, buckle up because things are about to get intense. The group carefully tiptoes inside the gate, only to find out there's no power. So, Garrett and Dave decide to take on the task of fixing it while the others search for a first aid kit. Why? Because Ted has a nasty wound on his back that needs some TLC. While the others patch up Ted, Dave and Garrett get to work restoring the electricity. Garrett explains that the gate was prepped for a second invasion, and they pumped in tons of salt water, but the hole was just too deep. Once the power is back on, Dave and Garrett start heading back, but suddenly, Garrett feels something wet on his hand. He looks up and, surprise, there's a body hanging above him. Just then, something in the darkness lets out a terrifying roar. The duo bolts back to the group to figure out their next move. With only 2 hours left until the eclipse ends, Garrett suggests hiding in a chemical warehouse because its doors are blast-proof. Smart thinking. But as soon as they leave the medical bay, a transformed human jumps out and attacks Garrett. He and Dave team up to take it down. They manage to defeat the beast, but the ruckus they made attracts even more monsters. In a panic, Garrett dashes through a door and slams it shut behind him, leaving everyone else behind, then gives himself some kind of injection to fight off his own transformation. Meanwhile, Dave takes his family to another room and spots some dispersal lines. That means the saltwater tank is just on the other side of the wall. He hatches a plan to funnel the saltwater through the pipes to keep the monsters at bay. Before he heads out, Laura gives him a quick kiss for good luck. But just as they're about to leave, the door breaks down, and the family makes a run for it. Dave climbs into the ventilation system, trying to be as quiet as a mouse, but he stumbles upon a monster happily munching on its prey in one of the rooms. When he finally reaches the tank, he carefully opens the faucet, and saltwater starts filling the containers. But as he climbs back, the monster senses him and starts to chase him, grabbing his leg. In a panic, Dave fights back, sprinkling the monster with salt, which causes it to crumble into dust. Meanwhile, back with the others, Tyler finds himself surrounded by a horde of monsters and decides it's time to open fire. Suddenly, Dave's voice booms over the loudspeaker, telling everyone to turn on the fire alarm. The monsters are closing in, and brave old Ted grabs an axe and tells Tyler to protect the family while he goes to take care of business. But before he can do any damage, several monsters pounce on him at once. Looks like Ted's monster-slaying days are over. Tyler keeps firing away, but he runs out of ammo faster than a jackrabbit. In a stroke of genius, he activates the fire alarm, and, bam, saltwater starts raining down on the monsters. They squeal in pain and crumble into dust, like slugs under a sprinkler. Just then, the eclipse ends, and the monsters start retreating back to their realm through the gate. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Another earthquake shakes things up. Laura and the kids try to make a break for it, but they run smack into Garrett, who's lost his marbles thanks to the transformation. In a panic, he takes a shot at Tyler, grazing his shoulder. Before he can pull the trigger again, Dave swoops in and clocks Garrett with a fire extinguisher. As Dave reunites with his family, a ginormous monster bursts up from the ground and lunges at Garrett. Garrett doesn't stand a chance, he gets swallowed whole. The family dashes to the medical unit and whips up a salty mixture in a cylinder. Just as the monster comes crashing through the door, they let it have it with the salty surprise. Boom. Monster down for the count. When they finally step outside, the world is in shambles. But you know what they say, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. Or in this case, when life throws monster apocalypses at you, you roll up your sleeves and start rebuilding. That's the Dunbar family way. This movie's name is The Day of Reckoning, which has got 3.4 out of 10 on IMDb. This movie teaches us how you survive a monster invasion and turn it into a family adventure. The end.